World War II, the Second World War. A global inferno, 1941 to 1944. By 1941, the war had already consumed Europe, but soon it would engulf the entire world. On June 22nd, Hitler's Operation Barbarossa drove deep into Soviet lands. German tanks thundered across the plains, Luftwaffe planes ruled the skies, and millions of Red Army soldiers were captured. It seemed the Soviet Union might collapse, but the Soviets refused to surrender. As the Germans approached Moscow, the brutal Russian winter struck. Tanks froze, supplies dwindled, and Soviet counterattacks pushed the invaders back. The dream of a quick victory was shattered. Meanwhile, far across the Pacific, Japan prepared a bold gamble. On December 7, 1941, Japanese planes swooped down on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Battleships exploded, airfields burned, and America was shocked awake. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Soon after, Germany and Italy declared war on America. The world's largest economy and military power had entered the fight. The war was now truly global. Japan's army swept across Asia and the Pacific. Hong Kong, Singapore, the Philippines, Burma, and countless islands fell. Prisoners faced death marches and brutal camps, but resistance grew. In places like the Philippines, guerrillas fought back, and at sea, the U.S. Navy began to challenge Japan's empire. In 1942, the tides of war slowly began to turn. In North Africa, German General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, pushed the British back toward Egypt. But at El Alamein, the British under General Montgomery struck back, driving Axis forces westward. Soon, American troops landed in Morocco and Algeria, opening another front. At the same time, the Soviet Union prepared its greatest stand. In the city of Stalingrad, German and Soviet soldiers fought house by house, street by street, in one of the bloodiest battles in history. Through the freezing winter, the Soviets encircled the German Sixth Army. In February 1943, after months of horror, the Germans surrendered. Stalingrad became the turning point of the Eastern Front. The Nazi advance had been stopped. In the Pacific, the United States won its own turning point. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, American carriers ambushed the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 aircraft carriers in a matter of days. Japan's expansion had been halted. From then on, the Allies began a long, bloody campaign of island hopping, retaking territory step by step. By 1943, the Allies struck at Europe's soft underbelly. They invaded Sicily and then mainland Italy. Mussolini's fascist regime collapsed, but German troops rushed in to hold the country. Fierce battles raged up the Italian peninsula, from Salerno to Monte Cassino. Italy became another brutal front. Meanwhile, in the skies, Allied bombers unleashed destruction on German cities. Hamburg, Cologne, and Berlin burned under relentless raids. The war was taking a terrible toll on soldiers and civilians alike. Across occupied Europe, resistance movements grew bolder. In France, Yugoslavia, Poland, and Greece, partisans sabotaged railways, ambushed convoys, and gathered intelligence. Ordinary people risked their lives to fight tyranny. By 1944, the Allies were preparing for the ultimate strike, the liberation of Western Europe. In secret, they planned the greatest invasion in history. Armies were gathering, fleets were built, and the day of reckoning for Nazi Germany was drawing near. The world was on fire. Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. But for the first time since the war began, there was hope. The Axis powers were being pushed back. Victory was not yet certain, but the tide of history was turning. The Endgame, 1944 to 1945. By mid-1944, the war was reaching its climax. The Allies had pushed the Axis out of North Africa, liberated much of Italy, and stood ready to strike at Hitler's fortress in Europe. The moment of decision had come. On the night of June 5, 1944, paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines in France. Before dawn, thousands of ships crossed the English Channel. Then, on June 6th, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history began. Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy under heavy fire. The cost was terrible. Thousands were killed or wounded, but the beachheads held. Within weeks, hundreds of thousands of men, tanks, and supplies were pouring into France. The liberation of Europe had begun. Paris was freed in August. By autumn, Allied forces pushed toward Germany's borders. But Hitler was not finished. In December 1944, he launched one last desperate counterattack through the Ardennes forest. It became known as the Battle of the Bulge. For weeks, snow-covered fields and villages saw brutal fighting. But the Allies held firm, and the German army was shattered. Meanwhile, in the east, the Soviet Red Army advanced relentlessly. After victories at Kursk and Stalingrad, they rolled westward, retaking Ukraine, Poland, and pushing into the heart of Germany. The nightmare of Nazi occupation was ending, but the price was staggering. Millions dead, cities reduced to rubble. By early 1945, Germany was collapsing on all sides. Allied bombers devastated industrial cities, U-boats were defeated in the Atlantic, and Hitler's allies abandoned him. In April, Soviet troops entered Berlin. As artillery shells thundered and flames consumed the city, Hitler retreated into his bunker. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler took his own life. Days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. In Europe, the war was finally over. But in Asia, the conflict raged on. Japan still held vast territories, and its soldiers fought with suicidal determination. American forces advanced island by island, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, each battle bloodier than the last. Kamikaze pilots hurled themselves at Allied ships, inflicting terrible losses. Yet Japan refused to surrender. In the summer of 1945, the United States made a fateful decision. On August 6th, an American bomber dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. In seconds, the city was annihilated, tens of thousands killed instantly. 3 days later, a second bomb struck Nagasaki. Faced with unimaginable destruction and the threat of further attacks, Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. At last, World War II was over. The cost was almost beyond comprehension. Over 60 million people were dead, soldiers and civilians alike. Entire cities were wiped out. The Holocaust had revealed the darkest depths of human cruelty, as millions of Jews and others were murdered in Nazi death camps. But out of the ashes came a new world. The United Nations was born. Nations vowed never again, and the seeds of a new global order were planted. Yet the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union would soon give rise to the Cold War. World War II had changed everything. It was not just a struggle between armies, but between visions of the future. In the end, tyranny was defeated, but the scars of the conflict would shape the world for generations.